This channel is part of the History Hit network.
August the 1st, 1936 in Berlin, the capital of the Third Reich. This brand new monumental stadium is the theatre of the largest Nazi propaganda operation of all time.
Vous avez 100 000 Allemands qui glapissent à Hitler, etc. On ne peut pas dire autrement. Des ouragans, des vagues de Heil, Heil, Heil. Et c'est une cérémonie nazie, qui était le décalque parfait des cérémonies de Nuremberg.
And yet, this giant ceremony is not a Nazi Party convention.
Adolf Hitler annonce l'ouverture des Jeux Olympiques. Mobilisation pour le sport et la paix.
Today, to us, this image appears unthinkable. 3 years before the Second World War will decimate Europe, Adolf Hitler watches his future enemies parade in front of him: the United States, England and France.
Aucun État, aucune nation n'a osé s'opposer aux Jeux à Berlin.
Personne ne bouge, on laisse faire. On laisse faire, c'est justement ce côté laxiste qui fait qu'on a été quelque part un peu complice. Mais non, le mouvement olympique voulait que ces Jeux perdurent.
Hyper-mediatized by the first televisions in history, this somber spectacle was the accomplishment of a meticulously planned strategy to deceive the major world powers.
Les nazis ont été machiavéliques dans cette affaire. Ils ont su utiliser l'olympisme à des fins de propagande.
It was a massive propaganda effort served by colossal means that allowed for the construction of a towering stadium and this luxurious Olympic village, a place that was specially dedicated to making foreign athletes into ambassadors of Nazism.
Hat man es geschafft, Deutschland sehr positiv darzustellen, sodass sie dann nach Hause gehen sollten und erzählen, was hier in Deutschland alles möglich ist, was hier geboten wird.
As incredible as it can seem here, Jewish and black athletes participated, nevertheless loathed by the Nazis. We went to meet the daughter of one of these athletes. This young runner, Jesse Owens, publicly humiliated Hitler on his home turf with his victories.
He won all the time. First of all, I think it was a surprise and amazing to most people. When he walked on the track, it was like just a roar.
But the most rebellious athletes were systematically excluded. This is what happened to one of the last living participants of the time, Gretel Bergmann, a Jewish and German champion.
They wouldn't let me compete. But whatever I did and I won, they didn't like because I was a Jew and I was supposed to be horrible. Anybody else had a story like this to tell.
How did the Nazi regime deceive the leaders of the most powerful countries in the world into glorifying their war ideology in front of the world's cameras? The Olympic Games of 1936, an event that should celebrate peace between peoples, an event that would forever become a shameful stain in history. In 1931, when Germany was a candidate to host the Olympic Games, the Nazis were not yet in power. But the country, still recovering from the destruction of World War I, already carries the seeds of xenophobic extremism that allow hate to proliferate. Humiliated by the Treaty of Versailles, then pummeled by the stock market crash of 1929, Germany's on the brink of asphyxiation. Half of the population is jobless.
sanctions ont été lourdes sur le plan économique, sur le plan financier et sur le plan de l'image, de l'impact en termes d'image.
This man tries to bring some relief to his country in the only way he can. He's not a politician, but simply a German Olympic Committee secretary. A former journalist, Karl Diem, accelerates forward with his vision. With the development of mass media, he sees that sports will soon pull in the passions of fans the world over. So in 1931, he does everything he can to convince this man, Henri de Baillet-Latour, the president of the CIO, to make Germany the host of the 1936 Games.
History Hit is a streaming platform that is just for history fans, with fantastic documentaries covering fascinating figures and moments in history from all over the world. From the Battle of Trafalgar and the Revolutionary era, right through to the Second World War. If you are looking for your next military history fix, then this is the service for you. We're committed to bringing history fans award-winning documentaries and podcasts that you cannot find anywhere else. Sign up now for a free trial, and War Stories fans get 50% off their first 3 months. Just be sure to use the code WarStories at checkout.
Henri de Baillet-Latour, c'est un comte belge qui a succédé au fondateur Pierre de Coubertin. C'est un aristocrate d'une famille fortunée de Belgique. Il n'a pas besoin de travailler, il est rentier. Il est marié avec une Allemande. Donc il a un lien particulier avec l'Allemagne.
Against Barcelona's application, Baillet-Latour rules in favour of Berlin, a highly symbolic choice, a choice that he thinks will repair the post-war humiliation of Germany.
Il est dans une logique de contribution à la paix dans le monde. C'est le discours du CIO. C'est le discours selon lequel le sport sert la paix mondiale. C'est la fraternité, du moins entre les élites qui se rencontrent sur le stade et qui doivent servir de modèle pour les peuples.
But Karl Diem's vision will soon be thrown into chaos. January the 30th, 1933, Adolf Hitler is named Chancellor. He quickly grants himself full powers and suppresses all personal freedoms. The first concentration camp in history opens in Dachau, and there Hitler begins imprisoning his political opponents. The organisation of the Olympic Games that had been decided 2 years previously was the least of his worries. All the more, he did not play any sports and considered the Olympic Games to be a decadence. Karl Diem wanted to hold his games at all costs, even if it meant confronting Hitler. He finds surprising support in his boss, Theodor Lewald, a Jew turned Protestant and the president of the German Olympic Committee.
Dès mars 1933, ces deux personnages demandent une entrevue au chancelier Hitler pour tenter d'infléchir sa position et de le convaincre de l'utilité des Jeux.
The meeting was held at the Chancellery of the Reich. Lewald and Diem faced Hitler. At their sides, listening attentively, was Joseph Goebbels, Hitler's Minister of Propaganda.
C'est Goebbels qui est le premier à se rendre compte de cette possibilité de propagande pour se faire bien voir, si vous voulez, de l'ensemble des autres pays. On se dit que ce serait peut-être intéressant qu'il y ait une vaste opération de propagande. Et donc les Jeux Olympiques arrivent à point nommé.
Utiliser les Jeux est une idée de génie, parce que c'est le monde entier qui se donnait rendez-vous. Et le monde entier du sport, c'est-à-dire de ceux qui ne font pas de politique, puisque le système olympique faisait qu'on ne devait pas parler de politique, que c'était la rencontre fraternelle de la jeunesse, de l'amitié et de tous les peuples.
Hitler had already made it clear that he was a warmonger 10 years previously in his book Mein Kampf. In 1933, he already had in mind notions of rebuilding Germany's military strength, taking revenge on France and invading parts of Europe. But Germany was not yet ready. The German army was still being rebuilt, and so the Führer needed to gain time. For the moment, he prefers to pass as a leader for peace, and the Games arrive at a perfect time for his use. So, as early as April of 1933, he orders Joseph Goebbels to coordinate a gigantic public relations operation.
À partir de là, ces Jeux ne seront ni trop beaux, ni trop grands, ni trop fastueux, ni trop clinquants.
Toute la machine allemande, économique, militaire, sécuritaire, propagandistes se mettent en marche.
6 million Reichsmarks, which would be about 54 million euros today, are immediately put aside for the organisation of the Games. In December 1933, the Führer orders that a monumental stadium be built, a stadium that will be the biggest in the world. The propaganda begins to work. The enormous works are already impressing the media across the world.
Berlin. Le gouvernement national-socialiste a voulu dépasser tout ce qui s'était fait jusqu'ici pour les manifestations sportives internationales des Jeux Olympiques. Plus de 100 000 personnes pourront prendre place dans le grand stade qui est en voie d'achèvement.
Hitler, lors de la première visite de cette enceinte sportive en construction, s'en est pris à l'architecte en disant « mais ce stade, ok, il est prestigieux, il est beau, mais il est trop petit pour nos jeux, il est trop petit ». Un stade de 100 000 places. Il était trop petit.
The folly of the Nazis' visions of grandeur did not stop there. On the outskirts of Berlin, the Führer imagined a sumptuous Olympic village. Here, for 15 days, the athletes of the world over would live and train in state-of-the-art comfort.
Tout avait été minutieusement étudié. Des salles de vie, 40 restaurants, des salles de spectacle, des salles de télévision, puisqu'on allait retransmettre un certain nombre d'épreuves en direct, un sauna finlandais, et un site qui était vraiment un oasis paradisiaque.
Man hat versucht, ein idyllisches, malerisches Dorf hier anzulegen. Es sollte wie ein gewachsenes deutsches Dorf wirken. Man hat ja auch diesen Waldsee hier, es war kein natürlicher See, geschaffen. Dann hat man sogar Wasservögel vom Berliner Zoo hierher gebracht, damit das Ganze auch wirklich belebt aussehen sollte. Ja, und auf diese Weise hat man es geschafft, Deutschland sehr positiv darzustellen, sodass sie dann nach Hause gehen sollten und erzählen, was hier in Deutschland alles möglich ist, was hier geboten wird.
But behind the scenes, the Nazis were already imposing their racist laws.
Also die Bauzeit hier, die betrug 2 Jahre ungefähr. Man hat im Frühjahr 1934 begonnen und war dann Ende April 1936 fertig. Insgesamt hat man hier 2000 Arbeiter beschäftigt. Die mussten aber alle einen ARIA-Nachweis haben. Die mussten also wirklich ihre deutsche Abstammung nachweisen.
A worrying mix of interests were operating there. The control of the Olympic Village was given to a captain of the German army, Wolfgang Fürstner. He would live in this house among the athletes.
Also Herr Hauptmann Fürstner war der Kommandant hier des Olympischen Dorfes. Er war schon lange Jahre ein treuer Offizier in der Wehrmacht gewesen, war auch sehr sportbegeistert, sehr sportlich und war deswegen sehr stolz, hier die Kommandantur im Olympischen Dorf zu bekommen.
The village was entirely financed by the Minister of War because the facility would later become a military camp after the Olympic Games. On the walls of the living rooms, Captain Fürstner had these military frescoes engraved. In the rest of Germany, the Nazis tightened their regime. The 15th of September 1935, less than 1 year before the official opening of the Games of Berlin, Hitler proclaims his Nuremberg laws. Jews have their German citizenship taken away from them. Their stores are pillaged. They are excluded from all public employment. They are even refused entry to hospitals. Gretel Bergmann was 21 years old and just had been accepted into university in Berlin. Like hundreds of other Jewish students, the doors to her school were now closed to her.
He made me feel like dirt. All the Jews were no good, and we just had to get used to it. We couldn't buy in stores that we were used to. We couldn't go into a restaurant. We couldn't do anything. We couldn't see our friends. The friends that came to see us came about 11 o'clock at night because they weren't supposed to see the Jews. It was not a good time, believe me. It was horrible.
Gretel is a huge fan of athleticism and particularly gifted in high jump. Promised a brilliant future in sports, she wins many awards. But the Nuremberg laws kick her out of her club and prevent her from joining any other sports establishment in the country. So like many Jews, she decides to leave Germany. Her parents have just about the needed money to help her to do so. She leaves Germany alone.
My parents decided I would go because there was no chance for me in Germany. I couldn't do any sports. I couldn't do anything. So I went to England and went to school there, and I liked it, except the English people weren't very friendly. But I was a German.
No one escaped the Nuremberg laws, even at the highest level. Even though he was the president of the Olympic Committee, Theodor Lewald, Karl Diem's colleague, is pushed from power due to having Jewish parents. Wolfgang Fürstner, the loyal commander of the Olympic Village, had the same treatment. He did not even know that one of his distant relatives was Jewish.
Allerdings wurde ihm kurz vor Eröffnung hier des Olympischen Dorfes, kurz vor Fertigstellung, wurde er degradiert. Und es wurde ihm ein neuer Kommandant vor die Nase gesetzt, das war ein Freier von und zu Gilsa. In Wirklichkeit ging es darum, dass Hauptmann Fürstner jüdische Vorfahren hatte und dass man ihn deswegen degradiert hat, bevor Hitler hierher kam am 17. Juni und das Dorf eröffnete.
The commander would not tolerate this dishonor. 2 days after the end of the Games, once the athletes had left, he shot himself in the head next to this lake in the middle of the Olympic Village. Facing a Germany plunged into terror, the president of the CIO, Henri de Baillet-Latour, took no action.
Le comité international olympique, sorte de vierge effarouchée, dit non, nous on ne fait pas de politique. Nous, on a les mains propres, nous sommes apolitiques, circuler, rien à voir. La question la situation des Juifs en Allemagne, des droits de l'homme en Allemagne, la démocratie en Allemagne, c'est pas notre problème, nous sommes au-dessus de tout ça.
Berlin, c'est la promesse de jeux grandioses, et ça c'est le vœu le plus cher du CIO, très certainement. Et aussi une autre raison, c'est que ni Baillet-Latour, ni les membres du CIO, dans leur quasiment majorité, ne sont vraiment hostiles au régime nazi.
Personne ne bouge, on laisse faire. On laisse faire, c'est justement ce côté laxiste qui fait qu'on peut se dire qu'on a été quelque part un peu complice et que le mouvement olympique lui-même aurait dû s'offusquer.
The first objectors made themselves heard from the other side of the Atlantic. Dozens of sports leaders and American politicians sent letters calling for an Olympic boycott to the CIO. The Olympic Charter considers that there should be an absolute equality of races and beliefs in the domain of sport. It is the direct antithesis to the ideology of Nazis that makes racial inequality the cornerstone of their beliefs. Huge gatherings were organised in all the big American cities. In New York, the Madison Square Garden became the home for the thousands of protesters who gathered regularly to protest against Hitler's games. In November 1935, even a member of the American Olympic Committee, Ernest Lee Janke, the son of German immigrants, publicly took position for the boycott in this letter addressed to the Count Baillet-Latour. Neither the Americans nor the representatives of other countries have to participate in the Nazi German Olympic Games without being conscient that in doing so they are condoning Nazi ideology and their sordid exploitation of the Games. He is also condemned by Baye Latour, who criticises him for being political. Ernest Lianke is excluded from the Olympic movement in a rare decision. He is replaced by a man who is far more compliant. Avery Brundage, an active member of two ultra-racist associations and who was also associated with the Ku Klux Klan, becomes the president of the American Olympic Committee.
I find that the preparations are well along, and I'm sure we'll be ready to receive the athletes of the world when they arrive a year from next November.
With this nomination, the CIO tries to suppress the attempts at a boycott coming from the US. Meanwhile, the movement expands in Europe at the initiative of the communist organizations. February 1936. These same communists come to power in France with the Popular Front government led by Léon Blum. The question of the Games in Germany divides the members of parliament. Noël van der Not had attentively followed these debates. He was 12 years old at the time, and in 6 months he was due to participate in the Games with his uncles, who were competing in rowing.
À ce moment-là, et à la Chambre, il y a eu des débats terribles pour savoir si oui ou non on allait voter les crédits pour que l'équipe de France puisse partir à Verdun. On continuait de se préparer, mais sans être certain qu'on allait y aller. Et ils n'avaient pas pris de décision encore.
The threat of a boycott gained momentum even up to the point when Germany finally finished their enormous Olympic construction works. The Nazis were in risk of losing their gargantuan propaganda operation that they had been preparing for 3 years.
La crainte majeure de l'appareil nazi qui s'est approprié les Jeux Olympiques était qu'on leur enlève l'organisation des Jeux. Le CIO était en mesure, à un moment donné, pour des raisons majeures, de dire eh bien, nous vous retirons l'organisation des Jeux et nous les attribuons à notre capitale. C'était une crainte que de se faire déposséder de l'organisation des Jeux.
They desperately needed to project a respectable image of themselves. With a perfect understanding of the power of symbols, the Nazis turned towards the father of the Olympic Games, Pierre de Coubertin, the founder of the CIO that had also organised the first modern Olympic Games in Athens 40 years previously. In 1936, the aging 73-year-old man lived his latter years in Lausanne, Switzerland, withdrawn.
La fin de sa vie est assez triste d'une certaine manière, puisqu'il est à la fois dans la gêne, financièrement, et puis il a 2 enfants qui sont frappés de lourds handicaps, pour lesquels il doit prévoir leur vie après sa propre mort. Et puis enfin, il est oublié. Plus personne ne prête vraiment attention à lui.
No one except Karl Diem, who'd progressively become a supporter of Hitler. He goes to Lausanne on multiple occasions to meet Pierre de Coubertin.
Alors Karl Diem va organiser une grande opération de charme. L'idée, c'est de commémorer en quelque sorte l'œuvre de Coubertin et Coubertin lui-même, donc en lui proposant de rééditer ses œuvres en Allemagne, de célébrer sa pensée dans la revue olympique. Il s'agit aussi de l'élever en son honneur des bustes. Voilà, et Karl Diem obtiendra d'Hitler un cadeau, un chèque cadeau en quelque sorte de 10 000 Reichsmark pour que Coubertin puisse subvenir aux besoins de sa propre famille.
Seduced, Coubertin helps to legitimize the Games of Berlin by recording a message of support that Karl Diem had played through radios across the globe.
Dès aujourd'hui, je veux remercier le gouvernement et le peuple allemand pour l'effort dépensé en l'honneur de la 11e Olympiade. Elle s'accomplit sur un plan magnifique, avec une parfaite conception des ensembles et un souci non moins parfait du détail. J'ai l'impression que toute l'Allemagne, depuis son chef jusqu'au plus humble de ses écoliers, souhaite ardemment que la célébration de 1936 soit l'une des plus belles que le monde ait vues.
Hitler accepts Henri de Baillet-Latour's visit in Germany. He organises a huge masquerade to hide the anti-Semite exactions and the ill treatment of Jews.
Il fallait absolument montrer au monde qu'en fait, l'Allemagne était un grand pays tolérant, ouvert, voilà. Et on le trimballe partout, c'est vraiment le mot.
Mais ne prenez pas en pantin. Mais déjà, Hitler méprisait profondément. Vous imaginez bien qu'Hitler méprisait tous les hommes politiques français, tous les hommes politiques anglais, les Américains. Hitler pensait effectivement, c'est quoi ce pantin? Je vais le rouler à la farine. Et effectivement, c'était le cas.
All of the governments were deluded by Adolf Hitler's shallow promises. He begins to wipe all of the anti-Semite signs from Berlin before the arrival of the first visitors. The prohibitions on the Jewish people were also lifted, but only during the 15 days of the Olympic Games. And more importantly, he promises that there will be Jewish athletes in the German Olympic team. Gretel Bergmann, the young exiled champion who'd left Germany for England, was forced to return.
Was just the Nazis, and they said she has to come back and compete for us. And then they called me back, and I said I'm not coming back, and they threatened me, you better come or your family is, finished here. So I went back.
The Nazis used Gretel Bergmann as their alibi in the eyes of the world as they made her participate in the qualifying rounds, all while maintaining a permanent surveillance over her.
But I was always scared. It was horrible. And if they knew I was talking about it against the Nazis, they would have killed me. I was always excluded in a way. They would sit in here and compete, and I always had to sit here and compete. And they were not too happy when I won. I knew I wanted to do it, and I wanted to do it well, because I wanted to show the Germans what a true could do.
The injustices she faced just increased the young athlete's anger. During the qualification trials, she breaks the national high jump record at 1.60 meters. She was performing too well, so Gretel Bergmann had become an annoyance for the Nazis. They feared the risk of a Jew winning an Olympic event in the name of Germany. They refused to recognise her stellar performance in the qualification rounds and eliminated her from the Olympic selection. The only explanation she receives is this letter. The head of the sports division of the Reich, who has chosen the Olympic team for the Games, was not able to select you for the team that will represent Germany. In light of your recent performances, you will without doubt be excluded from the team. Heil Hitler.
They just said I was hurt and that I could not compete. And I'm sure I would have won, because when I was mad, I was good.
1 year later, in 1937, Gretel Bergmann left Germany for good. She would later become an athletic champion in the US, where she still lives today at 102 years old. The Nazis' crude manoeuvring was enough to manipulate the US, the UK and France into officially declaring themselves against the notion of a boycott. In the summer of 1936, a grand Nazi masquerade set forth. First step, their PR campaign uses images to create a parallel between the pure man, the Aryan race, and the ancient athletes of antiquity. Dozens of Greco-Roman statues are erected in the streets of the capital. And on July the 20th, the Olympic torch is lit in the sacred woods of Olympia before beginning the first relay in history on its way to Berlin. A cunning use of symbols in the service of Nazi propaganda.
Ce feu purificateur qu'ils avaient déjà utilisé quelque temps auparavant lors du grand auto-da-fé de mai 1932 pour brûler les livres, et puis la torche qui servait évidemment aux parades. Voilà, cette torche-là devient, par la grâce des Jeux Olympiques, une torche symbolisant le pacifisme et la trêve olympique.
Once again, the relay of the Olympic torch was Karl Diem's idea.
Karl Diem est un admirateur de l'Antiquité grecque. Il y a dans l'intelligentsia nazie l'idée que les Hellènes, les ancêtres des Grecs, sont des Ariens et que donc l'Allemagne nazie, d'une certaine manière, en travaillant les corps par le sport, retrouve l'Antiquité grecque.
The decor was in place, and with it, Olympic values and Nazism had been cleverly fused as one. Hitler's Games could now begin. At the end of July, 75,000 visitors arrived in Berlin, naively full of excitement for the events to come. Among them were 200 French athletes, the young Noël van der Not included. They decided to come because to them the Olympic Games were apolitical. It was all just a grand celebration after all.
Les athlètes étaient tous d'accord pour aller aux Jeux. Pourquoi? Je vais vous le dire. Parce que c'est un gros sacrifice, il faut se préparer. Vous voyez ce que je veux dire? Tout le monde était content. Et puis ils se disaient, on va sortir de nos frontières. Parce qu'il y avait très peu de Français qui avaient voyagé. Les Français n'avaient pas de vacances, rien du tout. C'était une évasion de se dire, on va sortir de nos frontières, on va participer quand même à une grande fête. Parce qu'en principe, il faut le prendre comme ça. C'est une grande fête, les Jeux Olympiques. Dans Berlin, c'était inondé de drapeaux nazis et des drapeaux olympiques avec les anneaux. Il était noyé, le peu qu'il y avait, au milieu de tous ces drapeaux. Ça en était farci. C'était noir de drapeaux, d'Asie aux fenêtres, partout. Les drapeaux olympiques, on en voyait très peu.
On the 1st of August, the opening ceremony of the Olympic Games transformed itself into a gigantic celebration of Nazism. The Olympic ideals of peace had given way instead to a demonstration of German military power. The Hitler Youth, Hitler's paramilitary forces, SS officers and all types of security forces filed along Berlin streets under the eyes of thousands of onlookers from over 49 different countries. Hitler has something to celebrate. 100,000 people will fill his brand new monumental stadium.
Là, je le revois, là, il était toujours, vous savez, la tête droite, là. Il passait devant nous, là, suivi par tout son aréopage. Il filait vers le stade.
Around Hitler, the highest-ranking Nazi officers and representatives of Italian fascism, but also Karl Diem, the orchestrator behind the Games, and the president of the CIO, Henri de Baillet-Latour.
Tout le monde était là. Et Hitler, c'était sans arrêt. Sans arrêt, le Führer, c'était quelque chose de... Il mettait le peuple en furie, lui. C'est invraisemblable.
Le défilé des athlètes.
L'hymne allemand, mais aussi l'hymne nazi, sont entonnés par la foule. Une foule qui se lève à l'arrivée des athlètes, pas simplement ceux du Reich d'ailleurs, les athlètes américains et particulièrement les athlètes français qui font une forte impression.
Because the French proved themselves to be incredibly naive.
La France.
The delegation led by their mascot, young Noël van der Not, here to the right, hold their arms out in Hitler's direction. In their spirit, they thought they were doing the Olympic salute that was in use in previous Olympic Games, such as in Paris in 1924. But this gesture closely resembled a Nazi salute.
À ce salut des Français répondent des saluts nazis, puisque la foule semble se lever d'un bond, en quelque sorte, pour rendre aux Français le salut nazi.
On n'a pas pensé qu'il pouvait faire un rapprochement entre les deux, vous voyez.
The crowd, the Nazis and the entire world interpreted this gesture as a sign of allegiance with the Führer. Due to their naivete, France, Germany's longtime enemy, showed their submission in the face of Hitler. The only other athletes that saluted in this manner were from countries in support of the Reich, like Italy and Austria.
Faire ce type de salut devant la loge du Führer, ça ne pouvait pas ne pas avoir comme une signification politique, explicite ou implicite.
Peut-être les hommes politiques auraient peut-être pu y penser et dire, puisqu'on se trouve là-bas, on ne va pas faire ce salut pour une fois, on va faire autre chose. Personne n'aurait rien dit. Vous savez, on s'en foutait, nous, tout le monde.
L'Angleterre.
Les Américains et les Britanniques n'ont pas fait le salut olympique parce qu'ils avaient été avertis par leurs diplomates. Ils avaient vu l'impact du salut olympique sur la foule nazie et l'utilisation, d'une certaine manière, de ce geste par le régime. Et l'ordre avait été donné de ne pas faire le geste olympique dans le stade de Berlin, ce qui n'a pas été le cas pour la délégation française.
This opening ceremony, evoking the Nazis' glory, finished with the arrival of the Olympic torch carried in by the ideal Aryan athlete.
Des pigeons vont partir dans un joyeux et symbolique envol pour annoncer au monde l'ouverture des Jeux Olympiques.
Tout était image, tout était propagande visuelle. La mise en scène visuelle, l'arrivée de Hitler, les projecteurs, la flamme, l'image.
This was a battle of images, and the Nazis used each Olympic event as a form of political confrontation. All of the German athletes wore swastikas on their uniforms. Any successes of the German team were occasions to celebrate Nazi grandeur. Their flag was raised and their anthem filled the stadium, while the German athletes saluted their leader. To exhibit their power, the Nazis have yet another idea. They invented the first ranking board of nations, showing the number of Olympic medals earned per country, all in order to show off their highly trained athletes' medals. Wanting to be sure that his propaganda will be shown on a massive scale, Hitler employs a personal filmmaker, Leni Riefenstahl, who, with her 40 cameras and her record-breaking budget of 1.5 million Reichsmarks, produces The Gods of the Stadium, a major film evoking the glory of the Aryan athletes. These colossal games also attract 1,200 international journalists. 2,500 radio programs are dedicated to the games across the world.
Et puis, c'est la première fois qu'on va expérimenter la télévision en direct, enfin, avec un léger différé, disons. Il y a 25 écrans de télévision qui sont installés dans les salles de cinéma de Berlin et également à la sortie du stade, autour du stade. Et une fois que l'on a filmé, on se dépêche de tirer les pellicules, de développer les pellicules dans les cars régie pour foncer dans les salles de façon à montrer les images. Donc c'est le direct de l'époque.
But far from the stadium where the Olympics were taking place, the most important and subtle acts of propaganda were taking place. Joseph Goebbels sought to impress the journalists and their other special guests with the utmost care. The Minister of Propaganda organises sumptuous parties, the most grandiose of which being an Italian night reception on Peacock Island, a romantic oasis in the heart of Berlin. The German capital became the centre of global activity. Kings, princes and all of Europe paid Berlin a visit.
C'est les very important people qui se sont rassemblés et mangent des petits fours. Oui. C'est une manière, disons, d'agrémenter le séjour de tous ces gens qui font l'opinion.
During a fancy gala dinner at the Berlin Opera, where he had invited 1,200 reporters, Goebbels revealed his true intentions.
Germany harbours only peaceful intentions. I ask you to revisit your impressions of National Socialism without judgment, in a real Olympic spirit.
On distrait les gens. Ouais. Cette idée d'animation, c'est une idée tout à fait moderne, distraction, animation, mise en jambe, mise en bouche. C'était l'idée de Goebbels, effectivement, faire des visiteurs, des propagandistes, en disant « c'est merveilleux en Allemagne ». D'ailleurs, les journalistes sportifs, qui en général se prêtent de très bonne grâce à ce genre d'exercice, n'y ont vu que du feu.
In the Olympic Village, the 4,000 athletes were also used as propagandists for the new Germany. The Nazis also gave them a very privileged welcome.
On entendait des athlètes qui avaient fait d'autres Jeux olympiques qui disaient « mais c'est fou, on n'a jamais vu ça ». Tout était organisé d'une façon parfaite. Bon, il y avait tout, mais surtout que vous savez, à l'époque, nous vivions quand même chichement. Hein. Le matin, il y avait un choix, il y avait du cacao, du café au lait, de la novomaltine, des confitures, il y avait pratiquement un tas de produits que vous pouviez prendre comme vous vouliez. Si vous connaissez le français, hein, vous savez, s'il peut se goinfrer à bon marché, ça marche toujours. Hein.
The athletes are so amazed that they call their Olympic village a paradise on earth. One athlete among them, Jesse Owens, a young 22-year-old African-American and grandson of a slave, is even more surprised. He had known nothing but segregation in America and did not anticipate receiving the same treatment as the white athletes upon arriving at the Games.
I think when they first arrived, they wanted to know where their rooms were, you know, because they thought that they were going to be placed in a different place than the white team, the white boys on the team. So when they found that they were equal, I mean, that's a heck of a thing, you know? When you know at home, it's not like that. And they all ate together. You know, it wasn't the white boys here, the black boys here. It was a team because they were the U.S. Olympic team, and that's what they functioned as.
But hidden behind this meticulously thought-out welcome, Hitler's regime remained ultra-racist, considering black people as being less than human. Yet this young sprinter will single-handedly halt Hitler's enormous propaganda machine. August the 3rd, 1936, late afternoon. The entire stadium has their eyes fixed on the starting line for the 100-metre race, the king of all Olympic events. Even in his first strides, Jesse Owens had already left his adversaries in the dust.
C'était une détente, quoi, vous voyez ce que je veux dire? Vous en avez qui courent, par exemple. Ils ont les pieds au sol, on a l'impression qu'ils écrasent la piste. Tandis que lui, c'était l'inverse. Oui, ça bondissait. Vous voyez? On sentait c'était de la dynamite.
He won all the time. First of all, I think it was a surprise and amazing to most people. When he walked on the track, it was like just a roar.
Ich sehe mich heute, jetzt bei diesem Gespräch noch, an der Rampe da vorne stehen. Ich war unbegeistert, klatschen dabei. Nicht mal, also kann ich gar nicht glauben dabei. Nicht? Und der Jesse Owens, der hätte 4 Ehrenrunden drehen müssen vor Begeisterung, weil das Volk immer wieder Jesse und so weiter. Die wollten das war einmalig.
In just 10.3 seconds, captured by the world's cameras, the Nazis saw their perfect games start to slip away. And it wasn't over yet. Armed with his charismatic smile, Jesse Owens returned the next day to deliver the final punch. He was there to challenge this German jumper, Lutz Long, who was the current European record holder of the long jump.
He was just the epitome of what Hitler believed of the Aryan race. He was blonde and handsome and tall and athletic and all of those things. And I think he was from a fairly wealthy family. But he was a decent guy.
As separated as these two men were, they had a secret bond that they shared in the stadium, under the eyes of Adolf Hitler.
My father had fouled a number of times, And Lutz Long offered a suggestion for how to keep from fouling, and he put a towel just before the board so that he could see that if you step there, you won't foul.
Thanks to the advice of his adversary, Jesse Owens was able to complete an incredible jump at 7.94 metres. He broke a world record.
Lutz was the first to congratulate him.
Freute sich gemeinsam mit dem Lutz Long, nicht wahr, dem Weitspringer-Sieger und 100 Meter dabei, nicht wahr, mit diesem großartigen Sportler, schwarzen Mann. Nicht wahr? Oh, sah gut aus, mächtiger Mann.
Day after day, Jesse Owens continued to make his mark on the Nazi Olympic Games. The following day, he also won the 200-meter race and later the 4x100 relay.
Wissen Sie, das ließ sich auch von den deutlich sichtbaren in den bestimmten Mänteln, leichte Sommermäntel, die hatten, das waren die Beobachter von der NSDAP, also Nationalsozialisten, nicht wahr, die eingesetzt waren in Abteilungen da, nicht wahr, das ließ sich gar nicht bei.
Les victoires de Jesse Owens, c'est un échec cinglant de toutes les théories raciales proclamées par le Troisième Reich, et ceci en direct aux yeux du monde. Toute la presse mondiale suivait les Jeux Olympiques et donc a glorifié Jesse Owens.
Hitler lost face because he felt that his Olympic team was going to, you know, just trounce all over everyone. And that's why he left the stadium.
Dans sa tête, c'est un nègre. C'est pas possible que quelqu'un, un Untermensch, un sous-homme, puisse gagner. C'est quelque chose pour lui qui dépasse son entendement. Oui.
But officially there was nothing Hitler could do to this champion. But behind the scenes, he orders the Gestapo to watch him closely.
Die Gestapo, die geheime Staatspolizei, sämtliche Post der Sportler auch kontrolliert. Und ein Brief von Jesse Owens wurde konfisziert, wurde einbehalten. Darin wird ihm von einem hohen amerikanischen Sportfunktionär geraten, doch seine Medaillen auszuschlagen.
In this letter that Jesse Owens would never receive, he's asked to take advantage of the attention being paid to him to alert the world to the dangers of the Nazi regime. You will have the opportunity to be remembered by posterity not only as a great runner but as a great man, if, remembering all the filthy abuse poured out by Herr Hitler and his gangsters upon niggers, Jews and others whom he calls subhumans, you refuse to be crowned by him or any of his henchmen.
Jesse Owens hat eben nicht reagieren können, weil er das nicht erfahren hat, und er hat es auch zu Lebzeiten nicht mehr erfahren, weil das erst nachher, nach seinem Tod, überhaupt öffentlich wurde.
Under high surveillance, the Games would continue without anyone putting into question the dictatorship in place. The 4 gold medals won by Jesse Owens had certainly made a mark, but it is Germany that finished as a major victor with 89 medals, far ahead of any other participating country. The 16th of August at the closing ceremony, Henri de Baillet-Latour continues with relentlessly thanking Hitler.
Après avoir offert au chancelier du Reich et au peuple allemand le tribut de notre profonde gratitude, nous proclamons la clôture des concours de la 11e Olympiade.
Les Jeux Olympiques ont très clairement, sur le coup, été un grand succès qui a marqué, on le voit dans la presse française en l'occurrence, tous les journalistes qui se sont rendus aux Jeux Olympiques sont revenus enthousiastes et complètement éblouis par Berlin, l'Allemagne nazie.
On August the 25th, the Daily Parisian newspaper highlighted the unanimously acclaimed success of Hitler's lavish games. On the same page, another article reports without much fanfare that Germany is in the middle of considerably reinforcing its army.
Il a réussi, disons, à anesthésier l'opinion publique internationale et l'opinion publique allemande. Il a réussi effectivement à aligner l'ensemble de son peuple sur son nom. Pas de vagues, pas de bruit, c'est un succès majeur.
The Games of 1936 had functioned as planned, as Hitler's sleight of hand. The world's eyes were fixed on these grandiose Olympics, while in reality, Hitler was planning his war strategy.
Son objectif, c'est de mesurer la soumission de ce peuple à son Führer, à son chef, en vue des mobilisations guerrières futures. J'en veux pour preuve que le jour de l'ouverture des Jeux, l'état-major allemand décrétait la première étape de la préparation guerrière.
Just 3 years later, the Nazi regime made a joke of their Olympic values of tolerance and peace between peoples, showing their true nature. Adolf Hitler unleashed the Second World War onto the world as his armies poured across Europe.